listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, hey folks, it's Tuesday evening. Welcome to the show. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my program, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com, where you can come on over, see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio, and find all the different locations where you can listen to this show, such as iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, other places like that. And you can also come over to my YouTube channel and watch the video simulcast of this show over at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And while you're there, you can join the live chat room, which has already started gearing up for the night. And you can go over and talk with them, meet the other Intrepids, have a good time over on the chat room at my YouTube channel. And at the same time, remember, you can catch every archive of this show since its inception on Odyssey Radio, about 300 shows, archived over on my YouTube channel in video format, with the live chat rooms archived along with them. You can't add to the chat room. You can only review the chat room as the show is playing in video, but you can add comments down below the video, as you can tonight or any other night. So come on over to my YouTube channel, check it out, and see what you've been missing or what you'd like to re-listen to. And by the way, if you're new to the show, you can go and hear those archives and listen to all the different series that we have done on this show. You just go down below the YouTube video screen. If you go below, and you'll see all the different, or it's the main page. You go to the Intrepid radio section. You can hit play all, and it will bring up that list, and you will see the list of all the videos. You can scroll back chronologically through the old shows, going back over a year since we started this particular show on Odyssey Radio Network. And so you can go over there, see shows we've done on Native America, the conquering of the American West. You can see shows we've done on literalism versus mysticism in biblical history, in Christianity, in Judaism. Different shows we've done on psychology. A few shows we've done on, earlier on we did some shows on politics. And not really politics, though, more current events in our country and how to decipher politics for yourself through all the different various things that we experience. So you can go back through, find out all this stuff, and if you're new to the show or newer to the show, you can go back and listen to some of the old programs in the archives. And if you've got any question about them while you're here and in the live chat room, just ask some of the other people here, the old Intrepids that have been around for a year, and find out what they think of the old archives. And that's all I'll say about that. Now, let's move into tonight's program. I always am at this bit of a crossroads, not knowing which way to turn or which direction to take after I've finished a series. When I did the series that we just finished a few weeks ago on Native America and the conquering of the American West from the Native American perspective, we spent about 7 or 8 weeks on that topic. And when we were done with that, I was like, whew, well, what do I talk about now? Where do I go from here? And I have lots of ideas and lots of places I want to go, and certainly lots of things I can talk about. As you all know me by now, on both this show and Rocky Stucci's Situation Room, I am rarely at a lack for words of things to be able to talk about. And I guess that's what makes radio work for me, is that it's just me talking and you guys listening. And you can participate, of course, in the chat room, but it's basically sitting down and hearing somebody else talk. And by the way, if I can say at this point too, that's an incredible responsibility, a feeling of responsibility on me, that I impart to you something you can take with you, something that's meaningful. You found that I can get very emotionally and passionately wrapped up in the things I talk about, because I talk about things that mean something to me. And where they aren't a big passion, a draw of passion or emotion, they are a draw of intellect. So they're things I get passionate about: intellectualism, passionate about history, passionate about archaeology, passionate about many other things. because those are the things that drive me and excite me and make me want to talk about them. And so there's a certain responsibility I have that I take on to say, I need to present you with good material, something that you can listen to and not just draw something out of it, but enjoy it at the same time. It's still entertainment as well. And so I want to give you a reason to come back here an hour every night of the week. Well, every night of the work week, Monday through Friday. And so that's what I'm doing when I come to the end of a series. We just finished on, we did magic in Egypt, the magic of the Exodus, the Heka and the Hecha, the two different kinds of Egyptian magic, one represented in the staff and the other represented by the magic itself. And we segued into Moses and the Exodus. Then from there segued into, well, how did the Hebrews, the Israelites, actually come to Egypt? We'd hit on all these things in the past. And when I talked about my book and read it, The Exodus Reality, about a year ago, we talked about all this stuff. And it keeps coming up in different topics that we do. But so we spent a little bit of time on it. And so I've gone for roughly 2 weeks talking about Egypt and Moses, the Exodus, and Joseph, the patriarchs, and then Avaris, the city of Pyramses, the dating of Joseph, the dating of the Exodus. And, you know, we've done an awful lot of talking over the years, really, with all the broadcasting I've done, about how I think that there is a literalist point of view, of the Orthodox literalist view, won out over the more mystical, Gnostic view of Christianity, of Judaism, of the Bible. And we see we talked about this for a long time, about a year ago. We spent about 8 weeks on that one as well, talking about how early Christianity looks very different from Christianity that started to emerge a couple of hundred years after the death of Christ. And so we look at these topics and we say that while there are doubts that I have about certain theologies, belief systems built up in the Bible, I have said that I have always found the Bible to be efficacious historically. Whether or not you accept the theology in the pages of the Bible, you can certainly accept the historicity. And that might affect the way you view the theology of the Bible. So looking at characters like Moses, Pharaoh, Joseph, these characters in the Bible that we grew up with, King David, we know that they're real people, but were they? And so we wanted to look into that. And we're finding that they're real people. The history is intact. But that doesn't mean we don't have lessons to learn. It doesn't mean that the stories as presented to us are fully accurate. That the story is accurate to its times, or that the story itself isn't an apologetic about a person. And so we look to the times and the history. We look to establishing the dates and so on. And that's what I've done with these characters. And so I've really enjoyed that. But you come out of that, I could delve right into another character of the Bible. I can delve into characters out of history that have nothing to do with biblical history. And I've got a ton of those on the tip of my tongue that I want to get into. But tonight I thought I'd give us a little buffer in between and talk about, since we've been looking at heroes of the Bible and looking at them historically, I wanted to look at heroism in general, and also the things that we value. What are our values? What makes a hero to us? I look at somebody like King David, and I grew up believing this guy was a hero, and maybe in many respects he was. Yet we found when you dig through and you take apart and dismantle the story, you find it's a historically accurate photo. And David was probably a real guy. Not even probably, he was a real guy. But was he somebody to be admired as a hero? He had hero qualities placed upon him. That's why I subtitled that whole series, The Real Life Story of an Invented Hero. So Joseph was an invented hero. King David was an invented hero. Was Joseph? Was Moses? What were these guys like? What was the history like around them? And so in looking at history and trying to decipher some of these things, I wanted to ask about the things that matter to us. I started thinking, let's talk about heroes today. And then I thought, the song goes through your head, we don't need another hero. And I thought, yeah, we do. We need heroes. All the time we need heroes. I thought of maybe doing a little expose on Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And we might get into some of that, if I care to take this too deep. And so we're always needing heroes. We need heroes in our father figures, heroes in our mother figures, heroes in the people around us, in the people that we look up to. Let me ask you, who are your heroes? Some of my friends are listening to this. I want to ask you, who are your heroes? I've got a friend of mine whose dad passed away this last year. I grew up with this guy. And his dad, I always perceived his dad as being a little aloof, a little quiet. He was a scholar, always studying. I think he hunted with my friend and his brother, his siblings, and I think he fished and he did the things like that. But I always saw him as kind of a standoff kind of a guy. But I was also on the outside of that relationship looking in. But my friend said when his dad passed, he had me design a little medallion, a little, what's the word I'm looking for? An amulet type of thing that he's going to have made out of the gold from his dad's wedding ring. And so I did a drawing of a character and so on. And he is embodying my friend. He's looking and saying, this was my dad. I'm looking forward to seeing my dad again. He said one of the last things his dad told him was, I'll see you in the celestial city. Obviously very Christian in orientation. And so my friend's having that put on the medallion. And I thought about that. This is a hero to my friend. This was his dad. Why do we look to our dads? Why do we look to our uncles, our friends, and different people around us? What do we look for in a hero? What makes that person a hero to us? And so I want you to think about that. But first, before we get into what defines heroism, what are the things that matter to us? What are our values? Our heroes are based on the values that we accept or that we, maybe even without thinking it, these are things that we believe in. And it establishes for us who the hero is going to be, what they embody to us. Values are those things that bring distinction to our lives. And we don't find them or stumble upon them, we choose them. And when we do, we're on a path to certain kinds of fulfillment in our lives. And so I want to look at a few things that make us realize that we know what matters. It's kind of a clunky sentence there. 10 signs that you know what matters. Before we get into talking about heroes, why do we know what matters? Why do we know what to look for in a hero? Why does a hero attract us to them, draw us to them? From achievement and adventure, to wisdom, to wonder, and not to mention kindness, innovation, professionalism. Values are the things that we deem important in life and expressions of what you care about. They profoundly inform what you pursue day to day and year to year. And in so doing, they fundamentally shape the trajectory of our whole lives. I say to my own children over and over again, I said, be kind to each other. They bicker an awful lot. There's sibling rivalry there. There's brother and sister getting on each other's nerves all the time. And they bicker and they just talk mean to each other sometimes. Constantly on each other. And I say to my oldest son, Flynn, 11, I say, son, your younger sisters are looking to you to be their hero. You are their big brother. Be that defender of who they are. Now, maybe that hasn't quite clicked in for him yet. He's 11. His little sisters are 8 and 5, as most of you who know me and through this show know my family. And right now, they're just annoying little sisters. There's going to be a day where they will look up to him. maybe he'll look up to them in some respects as well. But he's the big brother. A sister can't be a big brother to the big brother. The big brother is the big brother to the sister. And so I told Flynn, you need to establish for them what they need to look up to in you. And I said, if you don't do that, they'll find it somewhere else. And you have to do that for yourself as well. Dads out there, if you're a dad, you need to establish for your kids what they need to look up to in you. Why would you be your kid's hero? And so values are this inexhaustible source of motivation. Inexhaustible because they're qualities intrinsic to being and doing. They're visible only through their enactments, the actions, the feat we give them. They're adverbs or adjectives or verbs. I did something blank, lovingly, kindly, affectionately, whatever adjective you want to put in there. It's a verb, it's an action word. These values are values because they are chosen qualities of action. And they can never be fully achieved, only embarked and shown, demonstrated, represented. Nevertheless, they give life direction. They help us persist through difficulties. They nudge us. They invite us. They tap us on the back of the shoulder. They draw us forward. They provide constant, soft encouragement. Now, whatever values you subscribe to, it's important to know that valuing is a uniquely human game. Do we see other animals valuing things or having values? No, they usually act by instinct for the most part. So these values that are unique to the human game arise from our capability for symbolic expression. There's no domain, no age, no situation to which values do not contribute. You don't find them, you don't stumble over them, you don't happenstance upon them, you choose them. And you have to do the work of exploring and looking and selecting and owning your values. And I'd argue that it's harder than ever for people, and especially young people nowadays, to know what they value. Modern technologies created a fire hose of information in the expansion of the communication media. You know, kids can hop on. I look at my kids and they spend far too much time online. As much as I want to be a role model to my kids, have them do things, Rainey and I get busy too. And sometimes it's, hey, they're playing a video game. Hey, they're watching their thing. And so that's good because we're so busy doing other things. And so they have those things, yet we have to be a guide of what comes in the eye gate, what comes in the mind gate, the ear gate, and the things that they will be accessing for themselves. The gush of words, the gush of images that we've unleashed on ourselves and our kids risk psychologically overwhelming us all. This show is just another small example of that. It's something that's out there now, that's going to be out there that anybody can access. And people who listen to this and acquire information from this are making a conscious choice to psychologically let this show affect who they are. And they can take it or leave it. So amidst all the noise that's out there, we look in the mirrors and we find, when we look at ourselves in the mirror, our reflection, a person who is too fat, too thin, too old, hair is thinning. Irony of ironies, too critical and judgmental. That's how we view ourselves. We're critical and judgmental of ourselves. We're unable to put to rest our own insecurities, many generated by media, constantly pulling us into these self-defeating behaviors. And by the way, the people who can conquer over that, who don't need to look in the mirror, who don't need to worry about what people think, they're people who have not necessarily gotten there. They're just people who have learned to say, I don't need to be driven by that stuff. And that becomes their value. So we're unable to sit, for the most part, human beings, with the pain, the distress that's a normal part of the human experience. Instead, we're offered ever more ways to escape it, especially nowadays. If you're feeling sad, there's a way to get away from that. If you're feeling... I was listening to a show on the drive to take my kids to school this morning. And the show, and they were handling it in a comedic way. It was one of the morning talk shows on one of the powerhouse stations. And they were talking about a woman who called in and said, I want to divorce my husband because he doesn't do anything. For 10 years, he's been a lump on a log. 10 years, he doesn't get work done. He just plays video games. And she laid out her case, and they were having fun with it and joking about it, and people were calling in what to do about this guy. And one thing was very evident. She's right. The guy wasn't upholding his responsibility. And you know what? That's a good way to end your relationship. Even if it's been around for 10 years or more and you've got kids, just don't engage in it. This guy was not engaged in his relationship. And so she was trying to find a way to get out of that because, you know what? We're bombarded with ways to find quick answers to all of our questions. There's an answer to that. There's good answers to that woman's question. But what is she going to lean to? We're unable to reach through the mental entanglement of human judgment, losing flexible contact with others, compassion, connection, community, peace of mind. They all disappear into the chatter. They disappear into social media. Why do you think there's so many people on social media that complain about their lives? And I don't mean that in such a negative way as you read somebody go, wow, this person's never happy. They're not finding it. They're complaining about health. They're complaining about relationship. They're this and that. And, you know, we could say there, but for the grace of God, go I. All of us can say that. But our peace of mind, our community, our compassion, our caring, our connectivity, it's all lost in the chatter going on all around us at all times. And we've always struggled with these matters. But never have we had such a toxic brew in which people are comparing themselves with others, judging others and themselves, and trying really hard to avoid discomfort of any kind. And I got to tell you, sometimes it's okay to be uncomfortable. There's an old song, a Christian song, by Wayne Watson that said, "It's good to be lonely every now and again, to be parted from the ones you adore, to sit at a table for two all alone and take a look at the world around you, at people who have no one to go home to and some with no place to belong, others consumed by their weakness and another when weak seems so strong." So these are the cognitive processes that feed our comparisons, our judgments, and avoidance. On the one hand, can also enable us to create that connection, to create the community, to create cooperation. And they can be used for good or for ill. We need to do better at creating modern minds for this modern world. And so that we can more directly connect our behavior to what we deeply value. That's especially true for our kids and the adolescents in our lives. Our nurturance is especially needed to help them choose what they care about beyond the evaluative, judgmental mind and its yearnings. They get little help from our commercial culture, and they have to find it in other ways to relate to their own minds. And so when we come back from this break, I want to go through 10 ways, and hopefully we'll get through them all, to know that you are focused on what's important for those around you in instilling values in both your right, gang, thanks for sitting on through that break. Welcome back to the show. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over, see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio. And at the same time, come on over to my YouTube channel, watch the video simulcast of this show, and join the live chat room going on right now, inhabited by fellow Intrepheads. So come on over to youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Now, we're talking about this whole idea of, well, I started talking about heroism, why we need heroes. There you go. Heroism, why we need heroes. And we all need heroes. We all need people to look up to, people that guide us. Maybe not so much as we get older, but it's when we're younger. We focus on the heroes of our lives. And we do this because we start to see values in them that we want to espouse, that we want to latch onto. Now, a young kid isn't necessarily going to word it that way or be able to verbalize that or articulate that. When I was a kid, I hero worshipped Captain Kirk, as you all know that, from the old original series of Star Trek. He was my hero. And it wasn't just, it's hard to describe because he embodied values for me that I liked. Now, it wasn't just that he slept with every alien woman that came along. That wasn't the value necessarily. That was the cool part of him. But there were values that he had that found affinity with me. How do we find heroes? Are heroes baseball players? For some people, that's a hero. Harmon Killebrew was an old one, about the same era as Captain Kirk for me. Yet those sports players that we uphold as heroes, what values do they instill in you? So we all have heroes. We all have people that we worship, in a sense. Hero worship. And we look for those values, and we find those values that mean something to us, that are meaningful to us. That's why when I mentioned that, I said to my kids, be kind to each other. Love each other. Care for each other. Don't fight so much. Show each other that you love them and you care for them. You know, when my daughter, I mix them all up sometimes, Rowan Claire. I was going to say Abby, then I was going to say Bryn, then Ellery. It's Rowan, my now 8-year-old. When she saw the Disney Cinderella, they did the live action one, which was really well done a few years ago. And I think she was 4 or 5 when that came out. 3 or 4, something like that. The mother was dying, of course. It was a Disney movie. So the mother was dying in the movie toward the beginning. And she said to the young girl, she said, when she's dying, she's giving her last wish and the soft music is playing. And she says to Cinderella, she says, I want you to be kind and be courageous in life. And Rowan Claire picked this up. She used to say that an awful lot. Be kind and courageous. And so I like to play into that with her every now and then. Be kind. Be courageous, but be kind. I think deep in the back of her head, she knows where that comes from. So we have our heroes, the things that we see those values and we acquire them for ourselves. We appropriate them. So here are ways to know that you are focused on what's important. This is what really matters when it comes to setting our values for ourselves and being able to model those for our kids. Take kids out of the equation altogether and say, this is what you need to model for yourself. And you can always be acquiring and instilling values in yourself. But we should, by a certain point in our adult life, say, I've reached that level where I have my values. I know what I believe. I know what matters the most, and I'm going to keep cultivating and keep growing those things. So here are 10 things that will help you know that you're focused on what's important in your life. Number 1, you feel a sense of enough rather than a need to measure whether you have more or less than other people. Now you catch that? It's a little wordy. You have a sense of, and you feel the sense of, having enough, rather than the need to measure whether you have more or less than other people. So we have values because we are verbal, symbolic creatures who can imagine futures that have never been and think creatively about how to take a current situation and advance it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a great idea for a company that makes you money. It could be something about a great idea to advance your life, which follows and allows us to gain this increasing control over aspects of our life. So language is double-edged. The symbolic processes that enable us to hold values bump up against the impulse to measure and compare ourselves in ways that leave us never quite satisfied, never happy, never at peace. As those values of cognition gain ground in us, we become inordinately focused on achievement, money, power, and domination over others as the ultimate of values. And we pretend that we'll live forever and are better than others. We wind up presenting a mask to the world, which prevents us from making genuine connections with other people. Values get you to enough. They make this moment about something that you hold dear, and then the next moment, and the next. And a person with values might look back and say, I'm committed to being loving. I'm never as loving as I need to be, but I'm on that journey. It's by way of example. Because what generates vitality and meaning is right up against what generates compassion, comparison, and judgment. It's all too easy to slip from enough to more. The solution is to regard values as qualities of being and doing, not as labels worn as this self-righteous armor that we put on and we like to show to the rest of the world. Actions are loving or kind or honest, when in the continuing course of life, each moment is values connected, the journey unfolds, and then one's life is simply enough. It's enough to do. And so if asked, many people would say they go to work to provide for their families. Okay? Most of us here who work say, I go to work to pay the bills. And this is important. It's true. It's a value. Supporting our families. But it's separate from the values that nudge them forward. Valuing money as a means to autonomy and sustenance is critical and presumably close to a human universal. We've got to have those things to live. It's like watching animals. What do? 24/7 practically. Look for food. They look for the things that make them survive. That's what they spend their life and hone their skills doing. Valuing money as a means to an end, wanting money to be able to contribute to others, for example, is one thing. It's another when money feeds the comparisons, the judgments, and avoidance of the pain that comes with being human. Sometimes we use money to salve ourselves. I got to be able to go out and shop or buy things to cover up stuff where my inadequacies or my comparisons to other people. If you use money in that kind of a pursuit, it doesn't matter how successful you are, you're always going to want more. It's a thirst that can't be quenched. It's never enough. So people vary on how dominant the comparisons more and less are in their mindset. Now, in a recent study, it was found that those who respond very strongly to more and less tend to not be as satisfied with life and to experience more negative effect than those whose response is weaker. And people who always want more, they always need to go a little bit further, are miserable because they'll never get to the enough stage. The goal is to keep doing as opposed to attaining. All right? So that was the first one. Let me repeat that one because it was a bit wordy again. The first thing that you need to look at when you're focused on what's important is, number one, to feel the sense of enough, rather than a need to measure whether you have more or less than others. So don't hold yourself up against others. By the way, this was one of the things that made me really move away from the church as I knew it, was everything was based on how other people might perceive who you are. And many times it was within the Christian community. It wasn't worrying about what those without the community were thinking about you. We were constantly worried about how we would come across to the rest of the people in our congregation. Well, you can't do that. What would they think of you? I remember once this same friend I mentioned whose father died recently, and he's having the medallion made up. We used to sing in church, and we sang this wonderful song by a Christian songwriter. But he's not a Christian songwriter that was on the list in this particular circle of fundamentalist churches that we were in. He was outside because he was part of a different kind of evangelical church as opposed to the fundamental church, both teaching the same thing, just different modes of practice. And we were called into the church office and chided for using a song by this guy, his composition of it. And my first question was, well, didn't the congregation enjoy it? And I asked the music minister, I said, was God, then you're saying, not pleased with our song? And he had to just give me that's not the point. The point is that it's what other people would think about us using a song and presenting in the church from a guy who is not from within the same methodological circles of practice. And to me, that was the most nonsense I had ever heard. And that was one of the things, really, I think it was one of the final things when I stepped out of that church and said, I can't come here and comfortably be here. So these are the things we do. We're always comparing ourselves, wanting more or less than the other, rather than it's enough. This is enough. For me, that was enough because it was praising God, that song. God was not unhappy with that song. But according to the music minister, he'd be unhappy with us for presenting a song that might be without the methodology, blah, blah. You get it. Okay, let's move on from that point. Number 2, you can readily name your heroes. This is a value that you need to remember. We're on looking at the things that you need to focus on that matter. 2, you can readily name your heroes. As our heroes, we choose the people who stand for something we admire. Something we'd like to stand for ourselves. As a result, one way of getting at your values is to ask yourself, who are my heroes? Once you identify the people who really mean something to you, who move you deeply in some way, then you can spend time examining and identifying exactly what that something is. What do they stand for in your eyes and the qualities of their actions? I've mentioned this guy before. I used him by way of an example at some point in the recent past. I had a hero in the faith when I was in seminary, my seminary days. And it was a guy named Jim Elliot, who was a missionary in the 1950s. And he and his friends, they had gone to be missionaries to the Auca Indians in Ecuador. And they were killed by the Aucas. They would fly their plane in and drop gifts, and they wanted to make first contact with these people. And they lost contact back at the home mission station and found out later that they had been all killed by the Aucas when they landed their plane there and made contact. And then, interestingly enough, the wife of one of the missionaries, Elizabeth Elliot, she went back in to this tribe that killed her husband and his friends with her small children, and was a missionary to them, and lived with them for many years. Now, Jim Elliot had written a book. No, I take that back. He didn't write a book. There was a book compiled of all of his memoirs and his diaries and things. And he used to say things in those diaries. He was a hero of the faith to me. And I would read some of the things he had written and say, this is somebody I want to be like. He said, there was one place where he said, in a very Christian context, he said, God will never use a person greatly until he has allowed them to be wounded deeply. And I understood that, and I knew what it meant. And I had found affinity with that. And so Jim Elliot was a hero of the faith. I knew what he was like. I knew what he stood for. And in my eyes, those were the qualities and the actions that I wanted to replicate and take on for myself. Number 3, you can single out the sweetest moments of your life. These are the things that matter, the values that matter. You're able to single out the sweetest moments of your life. Can you do that right now? If I said, sit back, close your eyes, and think for a second, what's that sweetest moment of life for you? Think of the most rewarding moments of your life and pinpoint what makes them so for you. Sometimes values are domain specific, sometimes more general. If, for example, you're looking at work values, think back to those moments in your career where you felt especially alive, vivacious, needed, vital, moved, connected to life. Moments that were special in some way. And then unpack that experience. There's going to be something that in that memory connects you to the vital source of valuing. And when confusion sets in, it can serve as a light to direct you to what you care about. So find the things that have moved you that way. Close your eyes. Take a practice right now. If you're in the chat room and you want to type in what that was. We certainly can't discuss everybody's, but if you want to type into the chat room, it was this moment. This is that sweet moment. This is that pinpoint. This is that direction-changing moment of my life. And why did it make it so? Dig in for yourself why that made that happen for you. What changed your direction? Number 4, you can identify your greatest pain. Now, I know we dwell on this a lot in our society. We all like to talk about, people for the most part like to talk about what's hurting them. I need to dump this. Now, you look at your social media. People like to dump on people. This is what's going on because they're looking for somebody to hear them. So we all know what our pains are. We all need to identify our greatest pains. We hurt when we care. Pain has large lessons to teach us all. It's taught me a lot of lessons. It's probably taught you a lot of lessons. So if you look inside the pain, open it up a little bit and see why it hurts. You have a precise and powerful indicator of what you value. If you've got a pain and you're able to dissect it, open it up and see what's at the core and understand it, you're getting a really good idea of, it's a powerful indicator of the things that you value. You can flip that pain over as if it were a piece of paper and ask yourself, what would you have to not care about for that not to hurt? That's what you value. If you were betrayed in love and the experience stabbed you through the heart, that means you care about love. If you were lied to and it deeply hurt you, you care about honesty. If somebody showed disloyalty to you in a way that shocked you, you can be certain that loyalty and commitment from others are very important things to you. You value them. If you're afraid of being with other people or afraid you may not be accepted by others, socially phobic or socially anxious, you value being included, being connected to others. So sometimes people aren't willing to just feel. But I have yet to meet anyone who doesn't have a written within a deep yearning to feel fully and openly and to feel genuinely themselves. That yearning is invariably connected to past wounds for which the mind's attempted solution is to try not to feel at all. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be new agey and sing-songy about this and say, oh, we must all get in touch with our hurts and pains so we can do... That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we all have pains that have revealed to us, if we look at them, what we actually value. Because if we don't value what's at the core of that, then it's not going to give us pain. So our pains are things that teach us what we value. So when you try to throw away painful parts of your history, you have to pretend that the other side of that experience, the values side, can be thrown away too. To throw out the pain of betrayal, you have to forget that love matters to you. See? So open it up a little bit. Open up those things. Look at yourself. Find out the things that have hurt me. These are stepping stones to finding out what I value. Then examine your values. Number 5, you don't know the content, but you can identify the theme of the next chapter of your life narrative. Do you know that about yourself? If you think about your life as a narrative, a story that you're writing, that you're creating as you go, what would you put in the next chapter? From this moment today, what's the next chapter for you? Where are you going from here? Maybe you're too embroiled in the thick of the current chapter to think about that. But where's your next chapter going to take you? I'm writing this book. I'm finishing this book for my agent. And I sometimes get stuck on where am I taking it from here? I know where I want to be ultimately at the end. How do I get there in such a way that it's meaningful? And that meaningful to the reader as either entertainment, excitement, action, whatever it might be. Something that's going to make them not want to put the book down. So if you think of your life as a narrative and a story that you're building, what's going to make you not want to put the book down when the next chapter comes? It can be helpful to think of values as an extension of your personal narrative, because those things create the theme, the meaningful through lines of our stories, the elements of the story so far, the challenges you've overcome, the opportunities you've missed or made or reached out for, the poignancy of love and loss, exemplify life as a journey. And you don't yet know all the details of the next chapter of your life story. There's no way we can know those. None of us can predict the future quite like that. But you might get a phone call in the next 2 minutes that could completely change the content of your life. But you do know the themes, the underlying meanings, because they're the values you're choosing to live by. So we don't know from moment to moment what's going to happen next. But we do have to be in touch with the themes that we want to carry on into the next chapter. The things that we want to see carry us through into the next chapter of life and form where we're going toward the climax of this. Values are number 6 now. It's what you do if no one was looking. This was a big one I used to teach when I was a youth pastor. I would teach the kids in my youth group. Serving people for God was the context I was in. It was a church youth group. Serving people isn't what everybody sees you do. Serving God is what people don't see you do. It's getting your fingernails dirty when no one else is looking or notices. And I would teach that to the kids in my youth group. Do you do things for attention, or do you do things whether or not somebody's going to notice you doing them? Think of how children play. They pretend that getting to that tree before you touch them is very important. There's as much life in those next moments of tag as they can possibly muster. They're running as hard as they can, laughing not because it's important, but because they're pretending it's important. They're caring about a moment by their own choice, not because someone's going to applaud, which allows them to fully participate in that moment of wistful play. And once you exit the playful space, the mind tells you, this is important. So you wind up putting your choices through the filter of logic, which becomes the decision maker. And you get shoved aside by your mother's voice, a television commercial, or a wagging finger from somebody who played a role in your history. Instead, it's more powerful to come at your values as a choice between you and the person you sense yourself to be. It's not unlike what you knew to do as a kid. in workshops that I've seen that are out there for people. And when I was a youth pastor and I used to teach kids, you have to find that playful space. You say things like, what if nobody's keeping score? What if nobody's watching? What if you were to do something and nobody would ever know that you were the one who did that? Would you still make the choice to do it? If somebody says, I just really want to help people, I can respond. If my kids, you respond, okay. But imagine that you helped someone and that was a total secret. Nobody knew about it. Nobody saw it. Well, actually imagine a situation in which it's possible to do something you care about and not be caught at it. Oh, I caught you caring. That exercise strips out the possibility of a self-aggrandizing motive. I'm so great. Look at me. I'm living my values and everybody sees it. Bask in my glow. We've done that. And so sometimes it's good to just exercise doing things and practicing not having anybody know that you've done what you've done. Number 7, your decisions make you feel like getting up in the morning. That's how you know you value it. Approaching actions playfully as a game doesn't trivialize them, it vitalizes them. All because you get to choose what's meaningful. Kids do that naturally. Innocence is where vitality lies. Adults have to reclaim that experience of innocence. And when you do that, you've plugged into the power of life itself. Life isn't supposed to be a drudgery. Remember, I've said many times, my mantra, 20 years from now, Mark Twain said, you'll regret more the things you didn't do than the things you did do. So cast away from the safe harbor. Set your sails to the trade winds. Explore, dream, discover. The power of life, when you plug into it, is that magical quality to experience innocence. And when you do that, you've plugged into the power of life. And how do you know what your core values are? There's a magic meter, vitality. Life itself feels as if it's there to be lived. It's there for you to live, not to miss while you're trying to get to the point where you can live it, but because there's an appetite of yearning. You're taking yet another step forward towards something you'll never quite reach. What matters is doing and going in that direction. Making it happen. Making life vital for you. And you know what? We're at the end of our time, and we still had 3 other things to cover in this. Maybe we'll hit those tomorrow. We'll talk about this a little bit more. And those 3 things were, you can write about what matters. You have a strong desire to communicate your interests to others. And you use your mind as a tool to humanize rather than objectify yourself. We'll talk about those a little bit tomorrow. So guys, we got to go out for a 23-hour break. You sit tight, and we'll be right back. Have a good night.